So nice. Thank you. I still don't. We want to start with Ruth chapter 3. We're going to overlap some. Ruth chapter 3, verse 14. Just to back up where we left off. Yes, thank you. Glad that each of you is here tonight. All of you are here. And we're going to finish the book of Ruth tonight. This will be our fourth hour in Ruth, roughly taking an hour with each of the four chapters. When we left off last Wednesday night, it's this strange story that of Ruth going in at Naomi's directions and lying down at the feet of the Lord of the harvest after he got all of his grain winnowed and cleaned and bagged up, and it's got to go to market in the morning, but it's his responsibility to stay the night with his sacks of harvest wheat. And so he's lying there dead asleep, and she lies at his feet. And she lay at his feet until the morning. And she rose up before anybody could see her, before one could know another. And he had already awakened and talked with her. And he said, "Let it not be known that a woman came into this floor." So he's not so much concerned maybe with his reputation, but also with her reputation. And, he doesn't want a lot of talk out there that he and Ruth had slept together, which is, I think, very forcibly explained that is not what happened. What are you doing here when he wakes up? And she says, "I'm just here to obey your command. Naomi told me to come and wait and see if you had any need." And he said, "Bring the veil that you have with you and hold it." And when she held it out, he measured 6 measures of barley and somehow tied up this cloth and laid it on her, and she went into the city of Bethlehem. Now, I don't know how much a measure is, but if the measure is an ephah, then that's about a bushel. So, that's a lot for her to carry. He laid it on her. So I wanted to say something about the 6 measures. I don't know if you're interested in biblical numerology. I'm not so much. I don't think every time there's a number mentioned it means something specific, but sometimes you might draw something from it. An interesting commentator said that the 6 measures represent the 6,000 years of history from Adam to the time of Christ's return, which will be the wedding feast. And so the 6 measures, that's the burden of man. God gives us our life just as Boaz gave this grain to Ruth. And God gives us all the gifts that we have, but we have to bear them. And you look down through man's long history all the way back to Adam, and man has drug his difficult burden down through all the centuries, meaning humanity altogether. And yet the burden on man was also the blessing upon man. But man had to carry it. But now the wedding is coming in the morning. Now this would not apply in reasonable allegory every time you see the number 6 in the Bible. But since the story of Ruth is all about a wedding that's going to bring forth a king and a price, we'll see, that'll have to be paid, it sounds feasible to me. So just something for you to think about. Am I making sense? If not, ask me the question. Okay. And verse 16, when she came to her mother-in-law, Naomi looked at her and said, "Who art thou, my daughter?" Well, she knew who it was, but Naomi is just astounded. I'm seeing qualities in you I didn't know were in you. Who are you really? And Ruth said, all I can tell you is what happened. And she said, these 6 measures of barley he gave me. And he said, for me not to go empty to you, my mother-in-law. And so I bring these to you. Then Naomi said, verse 18, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. I love that. Something's about to happen. You just sit here and wait. I believe that man is up to something early this morning. So now Naomi has become not just a revealer, which she had been reluctant to do earlier in the story, but now she's being a prophetess. This man is going to do something. So we come to Ruth chapter 4, and this has to do with a strange custom in Israel of inheritance. And let's just read about it, and then I'll take you elsewhere in the Bible to discuss it. Meantime, while Ruth is at home with Naomi, sitting there waiting, Boaz is going up to the gate of the city. Now, not every time, but quite often, the city gate is a public place with an area designated because Moses didn't like the idea of closed courtrooms where only the litigants in a lawsuit or a case show up and the public doesn't get to hear all the testimony. Moses used the term meet at the gate of your city, the most public place. Solomon describes the gate as the crossroads where people go in and out. There's the inside roads going along the wall and outside roads doing the same, and the coming in roads. The gate is a kind of crossroad, and an announcer would make it known days before that a particular trial will be coming up, and the entire populace is allowed to be there if any man wants to bear testimony. There were very few secret court cases, and this is one of the things that made Jesus' midnight trial before the high priest so highly illegal, because it was done behind closed doors. And Jesus told him it was illegal. You know, I've got many people that can testify on my behalf, but you haven't called them. And I'm not even supposed to give my own testimony. Others are supposed to give it, but you haven't brought them here. And the whole thing was wrong. So I'm just explaining a little something about the gate. Boaz goes to the gate of Bethlehem and sits down there, and he waits because somebody's going to be coming by. And sure enough, here comes the fellow that he wants to stop. The kinsman of whom Boaz had spoken to Ruth. There's a nearer kinsman to your dead husband than I am, and he's going to have the first right. But he hasn't visited you or your mother-in-law to say anything about his right as your nearest kinsman, and so maybe he's not interested. So let's see. And Boaz says to this near kinsman, "Ho, such a one, turn aside and sit down here." Well, the gentleman turned aside and sat down, and Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "There's a matter to be discussed today, and I need you 10 elders, not only as deciders perhaps, but as witnesses to what this man and I are going to be saying together." And they sat down. Then Boaz, verse 3, said unto this kinsman, now Naomi the widow, who is come out again from the country of Moab, she's got a parcel of land that belonged to her son, to her husband, and was inherited by her son. Now they're both dead, so it's in Naomi's hand, and she's got a right to sell this field. and it belonged to our brother Elimelech. So now we know who these, if brother means a direct brother, not cousin, then Boaz and Elimelech are brothers. And this other unnamed man is also a brother. But I find that kind of doubtful because we learn that Boaz is the son of Rahab the harlot. And so unless Salmon, who was Boaz's father, had other wives or another wife, then these two gentlemen would also be sons of Rahab the harlot. And I think there's a little bit of contention about that will come up. Verse 4, Boaz is still talking. He says, "And I thought to advertise thee," that means to advise you, to bring you up to snuff on what's happening. I thought to let you know and give you first claim on this. Sir, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If you want it, you need to declare today that you're going to buy it and what it'll be worth. If you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if not, if you will not redeem it, then tell me right here and now so that I may know, because I could have some plans for it. But there's no one else to redeem it except you, and then I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. That's this other fellow talking. Yeah, I can do that. I can redeem it. Well, let's just read one more verse. I'm going to be coming back to this. So Boaz said, well, all right, just so you understand, sir, my brother, my cousin, however these men were kin, I want you to understand that the day you buy the field of the hand of Naomi, it really isn't in just her hand. There's another woman who has a strong legal claim on it, whether she realizes it or not. You must also buy it from the hand of Ruth of Moab, a Moabitess. Doesn't realize it, but she's got a privileged claim on this land. Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, who turns, and this is going to be very important to my thinking tonight, the wife of the dead one was Ruth's husband. We learn, the two boys, the two sons who married in Moab, who had been sons of Elimelech and Naomi. Their names were Mahlon and Chilion. Well, we're going to find that Ruth's husband was not Chilion, but Mahlon. He'll be mentioned coming up. The wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Would you mind if I step down? I'll try not to get off camera tonight. To raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. I just want to make a couple of comments here about how important burial places are to these people. We have this interesting chapter earlier in Genesis where Abraham heard that his wife Sarah had died and went far to make sure he had purchased a burial place for him and her. And he bought it from a tribe of the Hittites, the children of Heth, Ephron the Hittite. And it's a sweet chapter in the Bible, the conversation between Abraham and Ephron and the people of the Hittites. And Ephron the Hittite says, no, you just take it. We honor you, Abraham, and we will honor your wife. Abraham said, I will want this as a burial plot, not only for my wife, but for me, and then for my son Isaac and his wife, and then for our grandchildren to be buried in. And he buys this field that has the famous cave in it called Machpelah, and it becomes a memorable place. Later, Abraham dies and sleeps with his fathers, we're told, but he's buried in that place. Later, Isaac and Rebekah will be buried there. Much later, Jacob, Isaac's son, will die in faraway Egypt. And we have this very interesting chapter toward the end of Genesis where Jacob says, or Joseph says, let me go to Pharaoh and see if Pharaoh will fund this. And Pharaoh does fund it. What is it? A massive caravan of Egyptians and Israelites coming together up into the land of Canaan from Egypt to the cave of Machpelah to bury Jacob there. Who cares where he's buried? He's 137 years old, dies in Egypt. We'll build him a nice little mausoleum here in Egypt. No, I want to sleep with my fathers. I want to be buried there. This idea of where you're going to be buried is very important. I try to talk to Chella about it. We're at the age, we need to make some plans. You want to be buried in Mexico? Nope. Want to be buried in Louisiana? Well, what about Puerto Rico or Chicago, places where we are? No. Well, do you want to be buried here? Well, no, because nobody, our grandchildren never come here to see it. The girls live in other places. I said, well, you want to be cut in half, and half of you buried where one daughter lives and the other half buried. She said, you're sounding crazy. I said, well, it's crazy for us not to decide. And she says, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Well, what's interesting, and I understand her, and she would be laughing if she were here listening to me tell this. But to these people, don't cremate me and just scatter my ashes to the wind. Don't just take my ashes out on a boat and pour them into the water. I want to be buried in a place of significance. Then, many years later, Joseph is old in Egypt. Very last little story in the book of Genesis. And he tells his brothers, one day, God will visit you here. And when he does, I want you to promise me that you will not leave my bones in this coffin in Egypt or sarcophagus, but that you will carry me, my bones, and bury them among my fathers. Longest funeral in history, 400 some years before they were released, and then they carried the bones of Joseph, the sarcophagus, for 40 years through the wilderness, and then they got to the land of Canaan and spent 5 years conquering the place, and then the men of Joseph's tribe says, we will bury him here. And that grave of Joseph becomes very significant later. What I'm pointing out is this idea. We don't have the body of Mahlon who died in Moab. Maybe it could be gotten, but we don't want to forget his name. His name must be raised up upon his inheritance, that he be not forgotten. Now, that I'm not sure exactly how deep this idea was among these people, but it is important that an honorable man have his name continue somewhere among his family. And let me also add that I think it is important for an elder person to say to his grandchildren some afternoon, you kids get in the car with me, we're going to go get ice cream, but first I want to take you somewhere. And he takes them to a graveyard and he says, here's where you children's great-great-grandmother was. Let me tell you about her. You know, and here's her husband, and here's her son. And the children will sit there chewing gum and blowing their noses and being bored and looking around. When are we going to go get ice cream? But they're never going to fully forget that grandpa or grandma brought them there and had them repeat the names on those tombstones. And this is where you came from. There's something lasting that occurs there that I think is important. There's something in the Bible saying right here with Boaz speaking, the memory of the dead should not be expunged. And so it's important to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And I can take you to other funeral stories in the Bible, but it would occupy the whole rest of my time tonight. David, for instance, once he got the chance, leading an entourage all the way over into Gilead, beyond Jordan, to retrieve and exhume the remains of Saul and Jonathan, to bring them back 40 years after Saul's death and inter them next to the bones of Saul's father and his brothers and sons, to all be buried there. It's the right thing to do. And David does this just after Sheba had raised a rebellion. Sheba the Benjamite had raised a rebellion, saying, what have we to do with the house of David? And it should be the tribe of Benjamin that is on the throne anyway, not David. But when David does this and honors the remains of Saul and his son and his other sons, this cements the Benjamite people to David's tribe of Judah. And though there have been many quarrels between them, from then on, Benjamin and Judah stuck together, and there never was another dispute between them. So funerals seem to be very important. And if they're not so important in our culture, for all of us, they were important for these people. And this is an important issue for Boaz. So, what is that, verse 5? Let's go to verse 6. And the kinsman said, well, I just told you I'd redeem it, but now you've told me this business that I've got to buy it from Ruth the Moabitess. I mean, I would buy it from Naomi. I don't want to buy it from this foreign girl who's here. I think that's what he's saying. And he says these words twice, I cannot redeem it. Listen to this. I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou, Boaz, my right to yourself. You can buy me out of this. For, he repeats, I cannot redeem it. Now that is quite a statement. I cannot redeem it if I'm going to be attaching the name of a Moabite woman to my inheritance. I don't want that field connected to my inheritance if a Moabite woman is going to be connected to it. If that means whoever she marries is now going to bear her blood. And I really don't want that foreign woman's bloodline mixed up in my inheritance. I think he's making a kind of racial slur or ethnic slur, because he had said, I'll buy that, I'll redeem it. And now he finds out he's going to have to deal with this foreign girl. He says, well, I can't do that. And why can't he? It's because it's going to cost too much. He'll have to pay something to Naomi and then to Ruth. Well, maybe so, but that's not what he states as his reason. He states more of his reason that I cannot mar my own inheritance. Now, Naomi's boys went out to the land of Moab and married two foreign girls. And what'd they get for that? God killed them. They died in the land of Moab. God killed Elimelech for allowing his sons to do that, to marry those foreigners. Don't you know what Moses said? You can't marry a Moabite, because the descendants of the Moabite will not be allowed among the congregation of the children of Israel for 10 generations afterward. That would mar my inheritance. I ain't doing that. But Boaz said, well, I'll do it because my mother was a foreigner also. So I'm not worried about getting my reputation messed up. I'll be glad to redeem it. I want you to turn with me for this law, Genesis chapter 25. And we're going to begin with verse 5. This is 6 verses I'm going to read. I want to read right through it. What did I say? I'm so sorry. Deuteronomy 25, beginning with verse 5. Now, in a moment, we're going to see back in Ruth that this guy takes his shoe off. In fact, he takes it off, the word used is he takes it off quickly. and hands it to Boaz. Why does he do that? Well, there's a little explanation in Ruth that said because there was a custom in Israel at that time, and explain. We'll read it. But it wasn't just a custom. There's a law Moses wrote about that. Are you interested in hearing it? If brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. Now that verse right there is where later the Sadducees come to Jesus, and talk about it. What if a man dies and his brother takes his wife, and then he dies, and then another brother takes her, and they die, and they're getting into a big hypothetical with Jesus. But that's where they're getting that from. Let's read on, verse 6. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. That's what Boaz was talking about, to keep up the name of the dead concerning this inheritance, this land. Verse 7, and if the man does not like to take his brother's wife, if he doesn't want to marry her, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up unto his brother his name in Israel, or a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. In other words, my husband's brother is refusing to take his place as the brother of the deceased. Then the elders of this city shall call him and speak unto him, and he shall stand to it, and he must say in front of all of the elders, I like not to take her. Then, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and she will loose his shoe from off his foot and spit in his face and answer. She will say it. This is what Ruth had the right to do. Spit in the old guy's face, and after she takes his shoe off, and then declare, so shall it be done unto the man that will not build up his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel the house of him that had his shoe loosed. Moses demanded that. Ruth might not know about it, but Boaz knows that law. And Boaz is reminding this kinsman, all I have to do is call her, and she'll take that shoe off your foot and spit in your face, because she has the right to claim that you keep up her dead husband's inheritance in his name. And we read verse 7 back to Ruth chapter 4. Is this interesting to you? We come to verse 7. And Boaz is just finished saying, you can redeem your right. Or the kinsman had just said, Boaz, you can redeem your right. I cannot redeem it. Now we have this inserted explanation. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. That means the changing of property from one person's hand to another. Let me say something about that. We do know that God told the Israelites through Moses, once you have your inheritance doled out to you by the Levites, once you conquer the land, you shall not sell the land forever. You shall not sell the land. Well, it's all right to sell it to another Israelite. That's what the word changing is about. What he means is, you shall not sell your land to another country. This is the land of Israel. It shall not be traded off piecemeal, chipped away at its borders and sold off to others. It is thine inheritance from the Lord. But we do see here that there is times There are times when two Israelites have to decide, well, who's going to inherit this, and I'll have to buy your right if you don't want it, or, and so land trading did occur. You understand what I'm saying? But you have the right to refuse to sell your father's inheritance in land. Even if a king like Ahab is demanding that you buy, that he buy your land away from you, as in the story of Naboth and Ahab and Jezebel. If a man refuses to sell his land, then even a king can't make him do it. This was in Israel in former time concerning redeeming land or concerning changing land titles. A man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Now, see, that's the custom. No man wants to have some woman show up and take his shoe off and slap him with it and spit in his face. So it developed into a custom. I'll take my own shoe off, please, before she gets here. And let's settle this quickly. I don't want that Moabite girl coming and spitting in my face like Moses said she could do. And therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders, all of the people who are standing around watching this strange case, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased now to be my wife. Since this jerk didn't want to marry her, I will. And here we have this phrasing again, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses to this day. Now, I think that's just gorgeous. I think it's deeply meaningful. It's touching. And we have this, verse 11. All the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two women did build the house of Israel. Now, you know who Rachel and Leah were. They were the two wives of Jacob, and each of them owned a servant girl, Bilhah and Zilpah. And as Sarah had done with her servant girl, slave, an Egyptian slave, Hagar, given her servant girl to her own husband to be a concubine, not a wife, but a concubine, so that the husband could multiply his children. And we don't like that in modern Christianity, but it certainly was done in those days. And so, since Bilhah and Zilpah belonged to Rachel and Leah, they aren't mentioned here, just Rachel and Leah. And of course, they're servant girls that they owned. But they're the ones that bore the 12 tribes of Israel, coming from those 12 sons. 2 sons from Rachel, 2 sons from Bilhah, 2 sons from Zilpah. That makes 6 sons. And then from Leah, 6 sons were born. And those 12 sons became the patriarchs of the 12 families that became the 12 tribes of Israel. That's what these people are referring to. It's quite a blessing to give, to pronounce upon Ruth, this Moabite girl that this nasty old guy had just rejected for being a Moabite. All of these people watch him stomping off down the road, with whatever money Boaz had given him, and he had just relinquished his claim and changed his inheritance, and he's going off muttering, well, at least I got some money out of this, but I sure ain't gonna marry. I ain't gonna have grandchildren from a Moabite a woman, half Moabite. Nope, not me. I'm getting out of here. So he's gone. These people watch him go, and they turn to Boaz, and Naomi is now bringing Ruth up here to find out what inheritance she has. And it's all going to be explained to Ruth in legal detail, and here is why. And when the people hear it, they bless Ruth, saying, may the Lord make this woman that is come into your house like Rachel and Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephrathah, which is the ancient name for Bethlehem, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house, they're saying it now to Ruth, let your house be like the house of Pharez, the woman whom Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. They're looking back in the book of Genesis at Jacob's son Judah, who begat a child named Pharez from a woman named Tamar. And if you go to that chapter, I'm not going to go there tonight, but it also deals with if a man dies and he's got a living brother, his brother should marry his wife, and goes down, through a few stories of brothers that keep dying. Well, I might have bought myself out of that deal a long time ago. Everybody that marries her dies, is my little joke. But finally, she beguiled Judah himself to come in under her, and she bore Pharez, and Pharez becomes in the genealogy of Jesus Christ as an ancestor of the house of Judah. So they're blessing her. And verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception. Now, why is that mentioned? She became pregnant. Why does that have to be mentioned? I mean, we get it. It's because Ruth never had a child of her husband Mahlon. Naomi never had a grandson born of her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. So she considered this a miracle that Mahlon and Chilion, they might have been impotent, but Boaz is not impotent. And she immediately conceives of him, and she bears him a son. And the women now say to Naomi, look at old Naomi now holding her own grandbaby in her arms. I've got me a grandchild. I didn't have this with my two sons. I've got it with my son-in-law Boaz now. They say to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, which has not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And they're still talking. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee. That's the main thing they notice about Ruth. I told you about this back in the first and second chapter. The main thing they notice is that Ruth loves Naomi. And that's the most attractive thing about her. Which is better to you than 7 sons, has now borne you a grandson. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became a nurse to it, her little grandbaby. We'll learn the grandbaby's name in just a little bit. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. And they called, a grandson, of course, and they called his name Obed, which has to do with the idea of worship. Obed. And then the commentator, the guy writing the narrative, adds, they didn't say this because they didn't know it, but he adds a commentary. This fellow Obed, this baby Obed, he became the father of Jesse, who would later become the father of David. That's the end of the book of Ruth, except for a little genealogy that the narrator adds on. Now, who do you think wrote the book of Ruth? I would bet on Samuel the prophet as being the author of this, but maybe not. We don't know who wrote the last few chapters of Judges, but it is often thought that it was Samuel that dug up all that past history and put it down and wrote the book of Judges and the book of Ruth for us and the early chapters of 1 Samuel. So we'll just guess. Maybe this is Samuel talking. And he says in verse 18, now these are the generations of Pharez. Let me list them out for you. Pharez, Jacob's grandson, through Jacob's son Judah. Now there's Pharez. Okay, Pharez begot Hezron, and Hezron begat Ram, and Ram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon, and Salmon, who married Rahab the harlot, begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. Now that's the end of the book of Ruth. I just want to call your attention before I finish tonight back to the beginning of the book of Ruth. Its first words are, and it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. If you want to know about those days, turn one page back in your Bible to the last statement in the book of Judges. And everything was chaotic, and the land was full of anarchy. Every man did what was right in his own eyes because there was no king in Israel. Well, that's picked up with the very next verse, which is the first verse of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, when all that mess was going on. But it gets through this little story of tragedy. There's a famine. Lady and her husband have to leave Bethlehem and go live among the Moabites to survive. The husband dies there. The two boys marry Moabite girls, and then they die. And then there's a good time of prosperity back home in Bethlehem, Judah. The old lady says, I've got nothing to keep me here, so I'm leaving and I'm going back home. Her two daughters-in-law, Moabite, they follow her on the road. She turns and rebukes them and says, don't follow me. Go on back home. I won't have anything to offer you. And one of the daughters-in-law is weeping and crying and leaves. The other one, whose name is Ruth, says, don't even ask me to go back. And 3 times Naomi says, no, you go back to your family. You go back to your nation. You go back to your culture. And you go back to your religion. And all 3 times Ruth says, no, I'm sticking with you. And I'll never go back to my nation, to my family, to my ethnicity, my people, or to my religion. Now it's interesting, those 4 things. In the book of Revelation, John speaks and says, before the throne of God was a huge multitude that no man could number, from every family, every nation, every ethnicity, and every language. And they have forsaken all those things. And this massive crowd cries out to Christ the Lamb and says, you have delivered us by your blood out of every family, every nation, every people or kindred, and out of every language. And you have redeemed us as one. Now, I think that's carrying back to Ruth saying, I have made a decision. I will never go back to my former gods. Your God's going to be my God from now on. I'll never go back to my language. I'm going to learn your language. I'm never going to go back to my family. I want to find a family with you and your people, if I can find a way in. And I'll never go back to my culture or my land. I'm coming with you. Well, I don't have any land to give you. I don't have anything to give you. Well, I'm coming with you anyway, so don't ask me not to. Now, see, this makes Ruth as a person one of the greatest people we've met so far. She makes a decision. She's adamant. She forsakes all. She knows what it's like to forsake mother and father and family and land, and all the things that Jesus later refers to when he talks to his disciples. If you're going to walk with me, you have to get rid of all your collective identities. And you'll walk with me, and I'll give you God's. You see, your family, when you were born, they told you who you were. Your country tells you who you are. Your culture tells you who you are. Jesus says, now you walk away from all that identity. Now I'll tell you who you are as an individual. They trained you in group speak and group think. You walk with me, you'll be an individual, and you will learn who you really are as an individual in God. So Ruth makes her decision. Then they get back to Bethlehem, and Ruth finds she's got a privilege that Naomi didn't tell her about. She can go glean and just with a little work, get food fairly free, and nobody will go out there and whip her for getting it out of the field. There's a law protecting widows in Israel. And then she learns she has a right as a widow. She wouldn't have it as a Moabitess, but she's got it as a widow. And then she finds favor with the man who owns the field. And then she is blessed, and she is sent to appreciate the favor that he's shown her when the harvest ended. And then he decides, bang, shang, lang, this is the gal for me. And then there's this debate we've talked about tonight at the gate of the city. And then the entire city embraces her. Now, when the old guy walks off and says, I don't want to marry her, nothing good will ever come of that, he has no idea of the future. What's coming of it is David and the lineage of Jesus Christ. God bless you. Thank you for your attention on these Ruth lectures. Brother James.